she paid for a stranger's bus fare. Days later, she discovered his true identity and was shocked. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Lena never imagined that a simple act of kindness would change her life forever. One night, exhausted from a long shift at the bakery, she used her last few coins to pay for a stranger's bus fare. She thought nothing of it, just a small gesture for someone in need. But the man she helped wasn't just anyone. He was Daniel Carter, a millionaire lost in the city without his wallet or phone. What started as a brief encounter would set off a chain of events neither of them expected. As their worlds collided, secrets were revealed, trust was tested, and a journey of love and self-discovery began. Little did Lena know, her simple act of generosity would lead to something far greater than she ever imagined. A simple act of kindness. The evening was growing colder as Daniel Carter walked down the unfamiliar streets of the city. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this neighborhood, not on foot, and certainly not without his usual security. But fate had other plans. Just an hour ago, he had been sitting in the back seat of his luxury car, heading home from a business meeting, when a group of masked men had appeared out of nowhere. Before he could react, his driver had been pulled out, and in a matter of minutes, everything he owned, his wallet, his phone, even his car, was gone. Now he was stranded with nothing but the clothes on his back. The irony wasn't lost on him. Daniel Carter, billionaire entrepreneur, was suddenly just another man on the streets with no money and no way to call for help. He had always thought of himself as prepared for any crisis, but tonight proved otherwise. The city hummed with life around him. Neon lights flickered from small businesses, cars rushed past, and people walked by without a second glance. He had never felt so invisible. He tried flagging down a taxi, but none would stop without upfront payment. He tried asking a pedestrian for a phone, but his disheveled appearance made them quicken their steps instead. It wasn't long before he found himself at a bus stop. A worn-out sign indicated the next bus would arrive in a few minutes. It had been years, decades even, since he had last set foot on public transportation. But with no other options, he had to swallow his pride. At the bus stop, a young woman sat on the bench, rubbing her hands together for warmth. She looked exhausted. A brown apron tied around her waist suggested she had just finished a long shift somewhere. Despite her tiredness, there was something gentle about her presence, something genuine. Daniel barely glanced at her as the bus arrived. When the doors hissed open, he stepped forward, reaching instinctively for his wallet, only to remember it was gone. "Come on, buddy, you're holding up the line," the bus driver said impatiently. I don't have any cash," Daniel admitted, feeling his stomach twist with embarrassment. The driver sighed. "No money, no ride, either pay or step aside." Daniel clenched his jaw. He wasn't used to being denied anything, let alone something as basic as a bus ride. Just as he was about to step away in defeat, a soft voice spoke up from behind him. "I'll cover it." He turned to see the young woman from the bench, reaching into her pocket, pulling out a handful of crumpled bills and loose coins. She handed the fare to the driver without hesitation. Daniel was stunned. She had no idea who he was, yet she had just spent what little money she had on a complete stranger. He hesitated before stepping onto the bus, glancing at her in disbelief. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "I know," she said, with a small shrug, "but you needed help." It was such a simple response, but it left him speechless. As the bus rumbled forward, Daniel found a seat a few rows ahead. He expected the moment to pass quickly, for his mind to move on to solutions for his predicament. But instead, he found himself glancing back at the young woman. She didn't look at him again, instead staring out the window, lost in thought. Who was she? What kind of person gave away their last bit of money without expecting anything in return? For years, Daniel had lived in a world where every favor had a price, where kindness was transactional. Yet here was someone who had done something for him without even knowing his name. He turned back to the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass. For the first time in a long while, Daniel Carter felt something unfamiliar, a deep, unexpected gratitude. And he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't forget this girl anytime soon. The bus moved through the city streets, its dim interior filled with the quiet hum of passengers lost in their own worlds. Daniel sat still, his gaze fixed on the window, though he wasn't truly looking at the passing buildings. His mind was elsewhere, on the woman who had just helped him. He turned slightly to glance at her again. She sat with her head resting against the window, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. It was clear she had just come from work, probably a long and tiring shift. He couldn't help but wonder why she had chosen to help him. She had barely hesitated before paying for his fare, and yet she didn't seem to expect anything in return. Daniel wasn't used to this. His world was full of people who did things only for personal gain. Even acts of generosity in his circles often came with an unspoken expectation of something in return. But she was different. The bus came to a stop, and more people got on. A couple of teenagers laughed loudly as they took the seats near the front, while an elderly woman struggled to find a place to sit. Without a word, the young woman who had helped Daniel stood up and gestured for the older lady to take her seat. The woman smiled in gratitude, and the girl simply nodded before gripping a nearby pole to steady herself. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't just a one-time act of kindness. It was who she was. The bus continued on, and Daniel knew his stop was coming up. But as he reached up to pull the cord, he hesitated. There was an unfamiliar feeling in his gut, a pull, a need to understand this stranger a little more. He turned around in his seat. "What's your name?" The woman looked at him, slightly surprised. She blinked before answering, "Lena." Lena. A simple, soft name, yet it carried weight in his mind. He nodded. "I'm Daniel." "Yes, go." She gave him a small smile, but didn't ask anything in return. She wasn't curious about him, wasn't trying to pry into his life. For someone like Daniel, who was so used to people demanding details about his wealth, his company, his influence, this was new. As the bus approached his stop, he hesitated again before finally standing. "I just wanted to say thank you, Lena." She nodded. "You don't have to. It was just a bus fare." Maybe to her it was, but to him it wasn't. He stepped off the bus and watched as it disappeared down the road, carrying Lena further into the night. For a moment, he stood there, feeling strangely unsettled. It wasn't just gratitude he felt. It was curiosity, a sense of something unfinished. Shaking off the thought, he turned and made his way toward his apartment building. The towering structure loomed over the city, a sharp contrast to the modest bus and the people on it. As he entered the grand lobby, the doorman looked at him in confusion. "Mr. Carter, are you all right?" Daniel forced a small smile. Just a rough night, James. The doorman hesitated before nodding and stepping aside to let him pass. Daniel entered the elevator, pressing the button for the penthouse. As the doors closed, he let out a long breath. Lena had no idea who he was. She had helped him without knowing he was a billionaire, without considering whether or not he could repay her. She had done it because, in her mind, it was simply the right thing to do. And for the first time in years, Daniel found himself wanting to do something, anything, to return the favor. But how? As he stepped into his lavish apartment, he realized something. He didn't know where she lived. He didn't know where she worked. He didn't even have a way to find her again. For the first time in his life, Daniel Carter regretted not paying more attention, because something told him that Lena was someone he needed to find again. The morning sun filtered through the massive glass windows of Daniel's penthouse, casting long shadows across the sleek modern furniture. He sat at the marble kitchen counter, a steaming cup of coffee untouched in front of him. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the previous night over and over again. Lena, the girl on the bus who had, without hesitation, paid for his fare. The girl who had no idea who he was and didn't seem to care. It had been years since someone had treated him like just another person, rather than a name in the business world or a walking bank account. That feeling of being seen as ordinary was oddly refreshing. But now he faced a problem. He had no way to find her. He drummed his fingers on the counter, frustrated with himself. He had spent years mastering negotiations, handling billion-dollar deals, and predicting market trends. Yet, he had failed to do something as simple as ask for more details about Lena. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts before dialing a familiar number. Within seconds, a voice answered, "Mr. Carter, good morning. What can I do for you?" "James," Daniel said, referring to his doorman. "Last night, when I got back, did I happen to mention which bus I took?" There was a slight pause. "You did, sir. You mentioned it was Route 17. Daniel nodded to himself. "Good. Can you find out which stops are near small diners or cafes?" James hesitated. "Are you looking for someone, sir?" "Yes." James didn't ask further, simply responding, "Give me an hour." Daniel ended the call and leaned back in his chair, exhaling. He wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. It wasn't like him to chase after someone he barely knew. But something about Lena stuck with him. Maybe it was her kindness. Maybe it was the way she carried herself with quiet strength. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the way she made him feel human again. An hour later, James sent over a list of places. Daniel scanned it quickly and made his decision. He was going to find her. Dressed in a simple button-down and jeans, something less recognizable than his usual tailored suits, he left his penthouse and headed downtown. The morning traffic was slow, the city bustling with people moving through their routines. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't heading into an office, wasn't preparing for meetings or negotiating business deals. Instead, he was searching for a stranger. The first cafe on his list was a cozy little place with large glass windows and a hand-painted sign. He stepped inside, inhaling the scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries. The cafe was busy, filled with customers chatting over breakfast, but none of the waitresses were Lena. He tried the next place, then another, and another. By the time he reached the fifth location, he was beginning to think he had imagined the whole thing. That maybe she was just passing through. not a regular at any of these places. Then, at the sixth stop, a small diner tucked between two larger buildings, he saw her. Lena stood behind the counter, balancing a tray of coffee mugs as she moved with practiced ease. She wore a simple blue uniform, her hair tied back in a ponytail, and her expression was one of quiet focus. Daniel hesitated in the doorway. For the first time in years, he wasn't entirely sure what to say. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. Lena glanced up at the sound, her eyes briefly meeting his before she turned her attention back to a customer. Daniel took a seat at the counter, his heart beating faster than it should have. When she finally approached, holding a small notepad, she seemed unaware of who he was. "What can I get for you?" Daniel almost laughed. She didn't recognize him. That was good. He cleared his throat. "Coffee, please." She scribbled it down. "Black?" He nodded. Lena poured a fresh cup and placed it in front of him. "Anything else?" Daniel hesitated, then decided to just say it. "Actually, I came here to see you." Lena frowned slightly. "Me?" He nodded. "I never got to properly thank you for what you did last night." Her eyes flickered with realization before she let out a small chuckle. "Oh, the bus guy." Daniel smirked. "That's me." She shrugged. "It was just a couple of coins." "To you, maybe," he said, "but not to me." Lena studied him for a moment, then shook her head. "You didn't have to come all the way here just to say thanks." "I wanted to," he said simply. She sighed, crossing her arms. "All right. Thank me. And then what?" Daniel hesitated. That was a good question. He hadn't actually thought this far ahead. Lena tilted her head, waiting. Daniel exhaled, then leaned forward slightly. "How about you let me buy you a coffee instead?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "I work in a diner. I have coffee all day." "Then let me take you somewhere for lunch after your shift." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you. Because you're the first person in years who's treated me like just another guy. Because I think you might be the most interesting person I've ever met." Instead, he simply said, "Because I'd like to get to know the person who helped me." Lena studied him again, as if trying to figure him out. Then, after a long pause, she shrugged. "Fine. Lunch. One time." Daniel grinned. One time. But deep down, he already knew one time wouldn't be enough. The lunch invitation weighed on Lena's mind more than she cared to admit. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from someone like Daniel. There was something different about him. He carried himself with confidence, but not arrogance. He was clearly used to getting what he wanted, yet he hadn't pushed when she hesitated. That intrigued her more than she was willing to acknowledge. By the time her shift ended, she almost considered backing out. But when she stepped out of the diner and saw Daniel leaning casually against a sleek black car parked just down the street, she hesitated. He was waiting, just like he said he would. Lena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward him. "You actually came." Daniel smirked. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She shrugged. "People say things all the time." He opened the passenger door for her. "Well, I'm not most people." Lena studied him for a second before sliding into the seat. The interior of the car smelled of leather and something faintly familiar. Cologne, maybe, or just the crisp scent of something expensive. She had never been in a car like this before, and she tried not to feel too out of place. Daniel got in beside her and started the engine. I know a place. I think you'll like it. She glanced at him. You're not taking me to some fancy restaurant, are you? He chuckled. You don't like fancy? I like real. Daniel nodded as he pulled into the street. Then I think you'll like this place. 15 minutes later, they arrived at a small, family-owned restaurant tucked into a quieter part of the city. The sign above the entrance was slightly faded, but the smell wafting from inside was enough to make Lena's stomach growl. She looked at Daniel, impressed. Okay, I'll admit, I didn't expect this. I told you I pay attention, he said with a wink, leading her inside. They found a table near the window, and Lena took a moment to glance around. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with hand-painted menus on the walls and the kind of atmosphere that made you feel at home. This wasn't the kind of place she would have expected someone like Daniel to bring her, and that alone made her drop some of her initial skepticism. When the waitress came over, Daniel gestured for Lena to order first. She chose something simple, and he followed suit. As they waited for their food, he leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. So, Lena, he said, tell me about yourself. She gave him a dry look. That's a broad question. Daniel grinned. Okay, let's narrow it down. What's your dream? She blinked, caught off guard. Most people asked her about work, about how she made ends meet, about her struggles. But no one ever asked her about her dreams. Lena hesitated, then sighed. I want to open my own bakery. Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. A bakery? She nodded. Yeah, ever since I was little, I've loved baking. My mom used to say that good food brings people together. I want a place where people feel welcome. Not just a business, but something that means something. Daniel watched her closely. There was a passion in her voice, a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Why haven't you done it yet? He asked. She let out a soft laugh. Because dreams cost money. Daniel didn't respond right away. He had more money than he knew what to do with. But he also knew better than to offer help too soon. Lena was the kind of person who didn't want handouts. She wanted to do things on her own terms. Before he could say anything, their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Lena found herself relaxing, enjoying the easy flow of words between them. Daniel was sharp, witty, and surprisingly down to earth. He listened more than he spoke, which was rare in her experience. By the time they finished eating, Lena had almost forgotten that she had been hesitant about this lunch in the first place. As they stepped outside, the afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the street, Daniel turned to her. So, what's the verdict? Was this a terrible idea? Lena smirked. I'll admit, it wasn't awful. He placed a hand over his heart in mock relief. High praise. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Thanks for lunch. My pleasure. She hesitated, shifting on her feet. Well, I should probably get going. Daniel nodded but didn't move to leave just yet. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to her. What's this? She asked. My number, he said simply, in case you ever want to have another non-awful lunch. Lena stared at the card for a moment before tucking it into her pocket. She wasn't sure why she took it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else. Either way, as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel Carter was going to change her life in ways she never expected. Lena tried to ignore the small card burning a hole in her pocket. It had been a few days since lunch with Daniel, and she told herself she wouldn't think about it too much. He was just a customer, a kind, intriguing, incredibly wealthy customer, but a customer nonetheless. She had lived her whole life being cautious, avoiding things that felt too good to be true. She wasn't about to let a charming smile and an expensive car make her forget that. But despite her best efforts, she kept replaying their conversation in her mind. The way he listened when she talked about her dream. The way he didn't dismiss it or act like it was impossible. He had asked why she hadn't done it yet, and now that question kept nagging at her. She had always told herself she was waiting for the right moment. But what if she had just been afraid of failing? That thought followed her through the week as she worked long hours at the diner. Every morning, she walked past the little empty storefront a few blocks away, the one with the large front windows and the faded "For Lease" sign. She had seen it before, but never let herself entertain the idea too seriously. It was a silly dream, something people like her didn't get to have. But today, for some reason, she stopped. She stood on the sidewalk, staring at the space, imagining what it could be. She could already picture the warm glow of the lights inside, the scent of fresh bread and pastries filling the air. She could almost hear the laughter of customers, the soft hum of conversation over cups of coffee. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. It was impossible, wasn't it? That night, as she sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, she pulled out a notebook she hadn't touched in years. The cover was worn, the pages filled with notes, recipes, and half-formed ideas for a bakery she had once believed she could build. She ran her fingers over the ink, the words feeling like echoes of a past version of herself, one that still believed she could create something of her own. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. A number she didn't recognize, but she had a feeling she knew who it was. Lena hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Hey, stranger." She smiled despite herself. "Daniel. I was starting to think you threw my number away. I thought about it." He laughed, warm and easy. "But you didn't." Lena sighed. "What do you want?" "I want to know if you've thought about what I asked you." She frowned. "Which part?" "Why you haven't started your bakery." She hesitated, glancing at the open notebook on the table. "It's complicated. Try me." She exhaled, leaning back in her chair. "It's money, Daniel. Starting a business isn't cheap. Rent, equipment, ingredients. I can barely keep up with my bills as it is." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What if I could help?" Lena sat up straighter. "No. You didn't even let me finish. I don't need a handout." "It wouldn't be a handout. It would be an investment." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "Daniel, just hear me out." His voice was calm, steady. "You're talented, Lena. I saw it the first time I walked into that diner. You don't belong there forever. You have something special, and the only thing standing in your way is a lack of resources. I have resources." She swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. "I'm not asking for anything in return," he continued. "No strings attached. Just a chance to see you build something amazing." Her throat felt tight. No one had ever said something like that to her before. No one had ever believed in her dream like that. It was tempting. Too tempting. But letting someone like Daniel Carter into her life in that way, that was dangerous. I don't know, she admitted. Think about it. She closed her eyes. Okay. They said goodnight, and when she hung up, Lena stared at the notebook in front of her. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the idea of failing, or the idea that, for the first time, she might actually have a chance. Lena spent the next few days trying to push Daniel's offer out of her mind, but no matter how hard she tried, it lingered. The idea of finally opening her bakery, of seeing her dream become reality, felt closer than ever. But so did the fear. She had spent years convincing herself that waiting was the right choice. That someday, when she had saved enough, when she was ready, she would take the leap. But if she was honest with herself, she wasn't sure she would ever feel ready. That morning, as she wiped down the counter at the diner, her coworker Mia nudged her. "You've been weird lately." Lena blinked. Weird? Yeah. Distracted, like you're somewhere else. Mia leaned against the counter, giving her a knowing look. It wouldn't have anything to do with that guy, would it? Lena stiffened. What guy? Mia smirked. The one who comes in here, always asking for you. Tall, ridiculously good-looking, probably rich as hell. Lena groaned. He's just a friend. Mia raised an eyebrow. Sure, and I just work here for fun. Shaking her head, Lena busied herself refilling the sugar containers. It's complicated. Mia studied her for a moment. Complicated or scary? Lena hesitated. Maybe both. Mia sighed, setting down her notepad. Lena, I've known you for a long time, and I know how much you want this bakery. So what's stopping you? Lena didn't answer right away. I don't want to owe anyone anything. Mia tilted her head. What if it's not about owing? What if it's just someone who believes in you? Lena frowned, not sure how to respond. Look, Mia continued, if this guy is serious about helping you, maybe it's not the worst thing to consider. Just because you're used to struggling alone doesn't mean you have to. Lena swallowed hard. That night, as she sat at her kitchen table, she pulled out Daniel's business card and turned it over in her fingers. She didn't know if she was ready to accept his help, but she was ready to have the conversation. Taking a deep breath, she dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. Lena. Hey, I was starting to think I scared you off. She hesitated. I've been thinking. I'm listening. If I did this, if I let you invest, it would have to be on my terms. Daniel was silent for a moment, then said, Tell me what that means. Lena took a deep breath. No favors, no special treatment. This has to be a real business deal. If I fail on my own. She half expected him to push back, to insist he didn't want anything in return, but instead, he just said, Okay. Okay? I told you, Lena, I don't want to take this away from you. I just want to give you the chance you deserve. She gripped the phone, her heart pounding. Then I guess we have a deal. She could hear the smile in his voice when he replied, Looks like we do. Lena had never been the kind of person to take big risks. Every step she had taken in life had been careful, calculated. She had learned the hard way that the world didn't hand out second chances easily, so she had always relied on herself, making sure she never owed anyone anything. But now, for the first time, she had accepted help. A real investment. A chance to build something that had only ever lived in her dreams. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Daniel moved quickly, making calls, setting up meetings, and arranging everything that needed to be done to secure a location for the bakery. Lena, on the other hand, found herself balancing her job at the diner with endless planning, creating menus, finding suppliers, and making sure every detail felt like hers. One evening, after a particularly long day, she found herself sitting across from Daniel in the quiet corner of a small cafe. They had just finished going over some lease agreements, and for the first time in weeks, there was a moment of stillness. "You look exhausted," Daniel said, watching her carefully. Lena let out a tired laugh. "I think I forgot what sleep feels like." Daniel smirked. "You know, most people would be excited about opening a business, but you look like you're preparing for battle." She hesitated. "It feels like one." Daniel tilted his head, studying her. "Why?" Lena sighed, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with her finger. "Because if this doesn't work, I won't have any excuses left. I can't tell myself I never got the chance." Daniel was quiet for a moment before saying, "You're afraid of failing." She nodded. "More than anything." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. "Then don't fail." Lena let out a short laugh. "That easy, huh?" "No," he admitted. "But I know you. I've watched you work harder than anyone. I've seen the way you never give up, even when you have every reason to. And I know that if anyone can make this happen, it's you." Lena swallowed, feeling something tighten in her chest. "This isn't charity, Lena," he continued. "I'm not giving you something you don't deserve. I'm just making sure you finally get what should have been yours all along." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was right. As the weeks passed, the empty space that had once been a rundown shop slowly transformed. The walls were painted, the furniture was brought in, and the scent of fresh wood and new beginnings filled the air. Lena spent every waking moment in the space, making sure everything was perfect. One evening, after a long day of setting up the kitchen, she sat on the floor, leaning against the counter, too exhausted to move. Daniel walked in, raising an eyebrow at the sight of her. "You alive?" he teased. "Barely," she mumbled. He chuckled, sitting down beside her. "It's really happening." Lena looked around at the space, the walls lined with shelves, the display cases waiting to be filled, the soft glow of the pendant lights making the room feel warm and inviting. "Yeah," she whispered. "It is." Daniel nudged her lightly. "So, have you thought about the name yet?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He waited, but she didn't say anything. "Well?" he pressed. Lena bit her lip, then looked up at him. "Second chances." Daniel blinked, processing the words. Lena exhaled. "Because that's what this is. A second chance. At my dream. At a new life." Daniel smiled, something warm settling in his gaze. "It's perfect." Lena felt a lump rise in her throat. For the first time, it felt real. The bakery was hers. And soon, the world would see it too. Lena stood outside the bakery, staring at the sign that had just been installed above the entrance. Second chances. The name felt like a promise, a quiet acknowledgement of everything it had taken to get here. The warm glow from inside the shop spilled out onto the street, illuminating the sidewalk. She had spent the entire day making final adjustments, ensuring everything was perfect for the grand opening tomorrow. She wrapped her arms around herself as the cool evening breeze brushed against her skin. The weight of the moment settled in. This was real. After years of dreaming, struggling, and pushing forward despite every obstacle, she had finally done it. But with that realization came a familiar whisper of doubt. What if no one showed up? What if she had been wrong to believe she could make this work? A car door slammed shut nearby, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned just in time to see Daniel walking toward her. "You're still here?" he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. Lena shrugged. "Couldn't leave yet." Daniel glanced up at the sign, then at the bakery's warm interior. "It looks incredible." Lena let out a soft breath. "I just hope people come." Daniel frowned slightly. "They will." She turned to him, chewing on the inside of her cheek. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen what you can do," he said simply. "And people recognize hard work. They recognize passion. And you have both." Lena looked away, trying to shake the nervous energy that coiled in her stomach. "I guess we'll see soon enough." Daniel studied her for a moment before tilting his head toward the street. "Come on. Walk with me." She hesitated. "I should probably—" "You've spent the entire day in there," he cut in. "It'll still be standing when you get back." After a beat, she sighed and nodded. "Fine." They walked in silence for a while, the distant hum of the city filling the air around them. The streets were quieter now, the shops closing, the world slowing down. Lena exhaled. "I haven't really let myself think about what happens after tomorrow." Daniel glanced at her. "What do you mean?" She kicked at a loose pebble on the sidewalk. "I've been so focused on getting the bakery ready that I haven't thought much about the future. What if this doesn't work out?" Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her. "And what if it does?" Lena looked up at him, her heart beating a little too fast. "You've spent so much time preparing for failure," he said gently. "Maybe it's time to start preparing for success." Lena swallowed. She wanted to believe in that possibility, but it was terrifying. She had spent so many years bracing herself for disappointment that the idea of things actually going right felt foreign. Daniel took a step closer. "No matter what happens, you're not alone in this." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. For so long, she had been used to carrying everything on her own. But Daniel had been there, through every late night, every moment of doubt, every step of this journey. Before she could say anything, a drop of rain landed on her cheek. Then another. Within seconds, a light drizzle turned into a downpour. Lena gasped as the cold rain soaked through her sweater. "Seriously?" Daniel laughed. "Come on." He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the nearest awning, but they were already drenched. Lena ran a hand through her wet hair and let out an exasperated laugh. "Perfect timing." Daniel shook his head, grinning. "Maybe it's a good sign." Lena raised an eyebrow. "A good sign?" He nodded. "A fresh start, washing away all the doubts before tomorrow." Lena let his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to let go of the fear and just believe. As the rain continued to fall around them, she met his gaze. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." His expression softened. "You don't have to thank me." But she did, because no matter what happened tomorrow, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't have made it here without him. Lena stood in the middle of her bakery, surrounded by the warm scent of freshly baked bread and the soft hum of anticipation. The grand opening was just minutes away, and every detail had been carefully arranged. The glass display cases shimmered under the gentle morning light, filled with pastries, cakes, and loaves of bread that she had spent hours perfecting. Small tables lined the walls, each adorned with a simple vase of fresh flowers. She exhaled deeply, trying to calm the nervous energy buzzing inside her. Today was the beginning of something she had fought for, something she had poured her heart and soul into. It wasn't just a bakery. It was proof that she had made it, that she had turned her struggles into something real, something she could finally call her own. The sound of the door opening made her turn. Daniel walked in, dressed more casually than usual, but with the same quiet confidence that always seemed to surround him. He held 2 cups of coffee in his hands and walked over to her, offering one with a small smile. "Thought you could use this," he said. Lena took the cup, her fingers brushing against his for a brief moment. "You have no idea how much I need this right now." Daniel chuckled, glancing around. "It looks incredible, Lena. You did it." She took a sip of coffee, savoring the warmth as she looked around at everything she had built. "It still doesn't feel real?" He studied her for a moment. "It will. Once that door opens and people start coming in, it'll all sink in." Lena nodded, but a knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. "What if no one shows up?" Daniel tilted his head. "Look outside." Confused, Lena stepped toward the window and gasped. A small crowd had already gathered outside, people standing in groups, chatting, waiting. Some were locals she recognized, neighbors and customers from the nearby shops. Others were unfamiliar, drawn in by curiosity. The sight made her throat tighten. "They're here for you," Daniel said softly. Lena turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if I mess up?" Daniel reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering for a moment. "You won't. And even if you do, so what? No one's expecting perfection. They're here because they believe in you, just like I do." Lena swallowed hard, emotions swirling inside her. She had spent so much of her life feeling like she had to prove herself, like she had to fight for every bit of success. But standing here, with Daniel's unwavering belief in her, she realized she didn't have to do it alone. The clock on the wall struck 8. Daniel smiled. "It's time." Lena took a deep breath, smoothed her apron, and walked to the door. With one last glance at Daniel, she turned the sign to open and unlocked the door. The first customers entered with excited smiles, filling the space with warmth and chatter. Lena greeted them, her hands steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. As she served coffee and handed out pastries, the tension in her shoulders eased. People laughed, complimented the food, and settled into their seats, turning her bakery into exactly what she had hoped, a place where people felt at home. Hours passed in a blur. The bakery stayed busy, and Lena barely had time to stop. She moved from the counter to the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves as she baked more bread, refilled trays, and made sure everything ran smoothly. Every now and then, she caught glimpses of Daniel watching her from a distance, his expression unreadable but warm. By late afternoon, the crowd had thinned, leaving behind a quiet sense of satisfaction. Lena finally took a moment to breathe, leaning against the counter. Her feet ached, and her hair was a mess, but she felt lighter than she had in years. Daniel walked over and handed her a bottle of water. You did it. Lena took a long sip before meeting his gaze. I really did, didn't I? He smiled. I've never seen you look this happy. She laughed softly. I don't think I've ever been this happy. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Daniel spoke again. So, what's next? Lena glanced around the bakery, taking in the warmth of the space, the lingering scent of cinnamon and fresh bread. She had spent so long chasing this dream, she hadn't thought much about what came after. I don't know, she admitted. But for once, I think I'm okay with that. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. Lena hesitated. There was something in his voice, something deeper, like he was holding something back. Daniel, what is it? He hesitated before exhaling. There's something I need to tell you. Lena's heart skipped a beat. Okay. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't completely honest with you when we met. Her stomach twisted. What do you mean? He met her gaze. I didn't tell you who I really am. Lena frowned. Daniel, what are you talking about? He took a deep breath. I own one of the largest hotel chains in the country. The words hit her like a shockwave. She stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. Wait. What? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. My full name is Daniel Whitmore. My family owns Whitmore Hotels. Lena's mouth went dry. She knew that name. Everyone did. Whitmore Hotels was one of the most prestigious hotel brands in the world. She shook her head, disbelief washing over her. You're that Daniel Whitmore? Daniel sighed. Yeah. Lena took a step back, her mind spinning. You've been coming here every day, helping me, supporting me, and you never once told me? I didn't want it to change anything, he said quickly. I didn't want you to see me differently. Lena let out a breathless laugh, but there was no humor in it. Daniel, this does change things. You're not just some guy who walked into my bakery. You're... I'm still the same person, he interrupted gently. The person who believed in you from the start. The person who wanted to see you succeed. Not because of my last name or my money, but because I know how incredible you are. Lena stared at him, emotions warring inside her. A part of her wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed. But another part of her, the part that knew him, truly knew him, couldn't ignore the sincerity in his eyes. She crossed her arms, her voice quieter. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Daniel looked down for a moment before meeting her gaze again. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't want to be seen as Daniel Whitmore, the billionaire. I just wanted to be Daniel. Lena swallowed hard. She understood that, more than she wanted to admit. The bakery felt impossibly silent as they stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Finally, Lena exhaled. I don't know what to do with this. Daniel nodded, his expression guarded. I don't expect you to know right away. Just don't shut me out, okay? Lena hesitated before nodding slowly. Okay. Daniel gave her a small, hopeful smile. Okay. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but for now, that was enough. Lena sat in her small apartment, staring at the bouquet of flowers on her kitchen table. They were from Daniel. He hadn't shown up at the bakery that morning, but a delivery had arrived with a simple note. No matter what happens, I believe in you. She had read it at least a dozen times, but it still left her feeling conflicted. Her emotions were a tangled mess. She wanted to be angry at him for hiding the truth, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the fact that Daniel had never once treated her differently. He had never flaunted his wealth or tried to use his power to impress her. Instead, he had supported her, encouraged her, and believed in her even when she doubted herself. But that didn't erase the feeling of uncertainty that gnawed at her. What did this mean for them now? Could she trust him? And more importantly, could she see herself in his world? The next morning, Lena walked into her bakery with a determined heart. The scent of fresh bread and cinnamon wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, reminding her why she had started all of this in the first place. She had fought too hard to let anything, even the confusion in her heart, derail her now. As she placed trays of warm croissants into the glass display, the bell above the door chimed. She turned, expecting another early customer, but her breath caught when she saw Daniel standing there. He looked uncertain, hesitant in a way she had never seen before. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit. Instead, he had on a simple sweater and jeans, as if trying to strip away the image of the billionaire she now knew he was. "Hey," he said softly. Lena wiped her hands on her apron, steadying herself. "Hey." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with things left unsaid. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to see me," Daniel admitted, his voice careful. Lena sighed. "I don't know either." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I meant what I said in my note. No matter what you decide, I still believe in you." She studied him, searching for any trace of insincerity, but all she saw was the same Daniel she had always known. Kind, steady, and quietly persistent. "I just don't understand," she said finally. "You have everything. Why did you want to keep it a secret?" Daniel stepped closer, leaning slightly against the counter. "Because I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen for who I really am, not for what I own. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who only see the last name, the fortune, the business. But with you," he hesitated, his gaze locking onto hers. "With you, I gotta be just Daniel. And that meant everything to me." Lena's heart squeezed painfully. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of his world still loomed over her. "And what happens now?" she asked. "Do you expect me to just step into your life? Into that world?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I don't expect anything from you, Lena. I just needed you to know the truth." She swallowed hard. "And if I say I can't do this?" A flicker of pain crossed his face, but he nodded. "Then I'll respect that." Lena bit her lip, torn between the fear of the unknown and the undeniable pull she felt toward him. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a long pause. "Anything." She took a deep breath. "If you had to choose between that life and starting over, just you, without the hotels, without the expectations, would you?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, as if truly considering her question. Then, slowly, he nodded. "If it meant being with someone who truly saw me, yes." Without hesitation. The honesty in his voice shook her. Lena looked down at the counter, her fingers tracing the smooth wood. "I don't want to be some charity case, Daniel. I don't want to feel like I don't belong." He reached across the counter, gently taking her hand. "You're not a charity case. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And if you ever feel like you don't belong, then maybe that world isn't meant for me either." Tears burned at the back of her eyes. She had spent so long fighting to prove herself, to be independent, to build something that was hers. And yet, here was a man willing to give up everything he had ever known, just for the chance to build something together. "I don't have an answer yet," she whispered. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "Then I'll wait." Days passed, and Lena couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she didn't have to choose between her world and his. Maybe they could create something new, something that belonged to both of them. One evening, after closing the bakery, she found herself walking toward a familiar hotel. She had never been inside before, but she knew exactly where she was going. When she reached the front desk, she took a steadying breath. "I'm here to see Daniel Whitmore." The receptionist blinked in surprise, but quickly nodded. "Of course, miss. Let me inform him." Minutes later, Daniel appeared, his expression unreadable. "Lena?" She swallowed her nerves. "I don't know what the future looks like," she admitted. "But I know I don't want to figure it out alone." A slow, relieved smile spread across his face. "You won't have to." They stood there, the noise of the hotel lobby fading into the background. Lena exhaled, feeling something inside her shift. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. "Come on," she said, reaching for his hand. "I think we have a lot to talk about." And as they walked out together, Lena knew this was just the beginning of something real. Lena never imagined that a simple act of kindness would change her life forever. It had been just another exhausting day. Her shift at the bakery stretching longer than expected, her feet aching from hours of standing. She had counted the last few coins in her pocket, barely enough to pay for the bus ride home. But when she saw the stranger struggling at the entrance, unable to pay his fare, something inside her told her to step forward. Without hesitation, she handed the driver her last coins, waving off the stranger's attempts to protest. She didn't do it for gratitude, nor did she expect anything in return. It was just a moment, a fleeting decision born from instinct. She never could have known that the man she had helped was Daniel Carter, heir to one of the biggest hotel empires in the country. And she certainly never expected him to walk into her bakery the next morning, determined to repay her in ways she never saw coming. At first, Lena was wary. She had spent her whole life working for everything she had, scraping by to keep her small bakery afloat while caring for her younger brother. She didn't have time for distractions, and Daniel Carter, with his expensive watch and confident smile, seemed like a distraction she didn't need. But Daniel wasn't like the men she had met before, those who threw money around to solve problems or expected the world to bend at their will. He didn't try to impress her with wealth or charm his way into her life. Instead, he showed up every morning, ordered coffee, and listened. He watched her work, asked about her dreams, and seemed genuinely fascinated by her world. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and when Lena discovered the truth about Daniel's identity, the fragile trust between them shattered. She felt betrayed, not because of his wealth, but because he had chosen to hide it from her. She had spent her whole life proving that she didn't need anyone to save her, and the idea that he had kept something so important from her made her question everything. When she confronted him, his explanation was not one of arrogance, but of fear. He wasn't hiding his wealth from her. He was hiding from a world that only saw him as an heir, never as a man. He had wanted for once to be seen for who he truly was. Lena wasn't sure she could forgive him. She had spent years building walls around herself, afraid of trusting someone who might one day walk away. But Daniel wasn't ready to give up. He didn't use grand gestures or extravagant gifts to win her back. Instead, he proved through quiet persistence and unwavering honesty that he was willing to change. And when he walked away from his family's business, choosing to invest in something real, something that mattered to him, Lena realized that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about him. Their journey wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of uncertainty, of wondering if they were making the right choice. But with every challenge they faced, they found strength in each other. Lena, who had always believed she had to do everything alone, learned that accepting help didn't mean weakness. Daniel, who had spent his life following a path set for him, discovered that true success wasn't measured in wealth, but in the impact he made. Together, they built something new. Daniel invested in Lena's bakery, not as a benefactor, but as a partner. And in return, Lena stood by him as he stepped out of his family's shadow, creating a hotel that reflected who he truly was. The day the bakery officially reopened, with a line of customers stretching out the door, Lena looked around and felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. She had spent so many years running, pushing people away, believing that love and trust were luxuries she couldn't afford. But standing beside Daniel, watching their dreams take shape, she understood that real love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about choosing each other every day, through every struggle, every doubt, and every uncertainty. Their story teaches a powerful lesson. Kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives. Lena's decision to give away her last coins that night on the bus was not just an act of generosity. It was the first step in a journey she never could have predicted. We often underestimate the ripple effect of our actions, not realizing that the smallest choices can lead to the biggest transformations. This story is also a reminder that wealth and status do not define a person's worth. Daniel had everything the world told him he should want, yet he felt lost, trapped by expectations he never chose. It was only when he stepped away, when he allowed himself to chase something real, that he found happiness. Too often, we believe that success is measured by the size of our bank accounts, the cars we drive, or the titles we hold. But true success comes from living a life that feels authentic, from building something meaningful with people who believe in us. Lena and Daniel's journey also highlights the importance of trust. Love is not about perfection. It is about honesty, about showing up even when things are difficult, about choosing to believe in someone even when doubt creeps in. Lena had to learn to let go of her fears, to trust that Daniel wasn't just another person who would walk away. And Daniel had to prove that he was willing to stand by her side, not just with words, but with actions. Perhaps the most valuable lesson in their story is this: happiness is a choice. It is not something that happens to us. It is something we create. It requires courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to take risks. Lena and Daniel could have walked away from each other countless times, choosing the safety of their old lives. But they didn't. They chose to fight, to believe, to build a future together. And in doing so, they created something greater than either of them could have imagined. As we reflect on their story, let it be a reminder that our lives are shaped by the choices we make every day. Will we choose kindness even when it is inconvenient? Will we allow ourselves to trust even when it feels risky? Will we chase the life that truly fulfills us rather than the one that is simply expected of us? These are the questions that define our journey. If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness changed your life? Have you ever had to take a risk to chase something real? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of what truly matters, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. Thank you for being here, and remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness lead to the biggest miracles.